Hey, do you want to melt stubborn fat, kill disease, and reverse aging? I've got quite the lesson for you today. I'll be sharing with you the top 10 rules to follow to accomplish all of that and so much more. This is actually episode 1000 of my Metabolic Freedom Podcast, where I'm about to distill for you right now in the next few minutes 17 plus years of research, interviewing over 900 of the greatest health scientists, doctors, and researchers in the entire world in 10 valuable lessons that's broken down into fat loss, metabolic health, and longevity. Let's start with the first rule to follow. Rule number 1, don't chase calories, chase inflammation. Chances are you are following or have followed the old adage, eat less, move more. I have found, not just from interviewing a ton of brilliant people, but working with tens of thousands of people, that this fails 99.9% of the time long term. Focusing on calories is a huge distraction. It distracts you from what really matters, which is inflammation. You see, the human body is not a bank account, a calculator, or a math equation. It's a very complex chemistry lab. And if you're overweight right now, guess what? You don't have a weight problem. You have a weight symptom. Calories focus on the symptom, meaning you don't lose weight to get healthy. I have discovered you get healthy to lose weight. That's when you focus on inflammation. The weight comes off as a side effect. So the first rule of thumb here, the first lesson, is to detach away from the distraction of counting calories. You see, calories matter, but they're not important. Inflammation is important. So the rest of these golden rules I'm sharing with you today will help you lower inflammation, burn fat. And this is great news because you don't have to rely on willpower, which is a finite resource. You don't have to measure your food and count every calorie. That is nonsense. It doesn't work. We've seen this fail time after time. I was guilty of teaching this for many, many years until I came to the conclusion that I'm not doing my community a service. I'm distracting them. So I want you, as this first rule to follow, to focus on inflammation. Let's move on to rule number 2. That's going to be to get off the glucose roller coaster. If you're a sugar burner, you are not going to burn fat. I want you to remember this formula here. High levels of insulin, you are storing fat. Low levels of insulin, you are burning fat. What raises insulin? Insulin is a hormone that is increased and produced when you have increase in your blood sugar. And it is the carbohydrates that do that. It is the snacking, the grazing, the carbohydrates. And if you're on this blood sugar roller coaster, it's because you're having too many carbohydrates. It's because you're snacking and grazing in between your meals. Every time you snack and graze, you start the digestive system. You age yourself faster. Yes, I've got news for you. When I've interviewed all these scientists and doctors, they all agree that when you eat frequently, like every 2 to 3 hours, it's one of the fastest ways to age yourself. In my book, Metabolic Freedom, I talk about the Hayflick limit. The Hayflick limit is this. It's the certain amount of times your cells can duplicate until they cannot duplicate anymore, and they essentially turn into what's called zombie cells. These zombie cells infect other zombie cells, which creates inflammation, weight gain, and disease. When you eat high carbohydrates and you snack and you graze, you reach this Hayflick limit much faster. It's like trying to get into your groove when you're working at home in your home office, but every 2 to 3 hours, somebody's banging on your office door, disrupting your flow state. This is the same thing happening to your metabolism when you're snacking and grazing and eating high carbohydrates. So with this second rule is to eliminate the snacks. Eat 3 meals a day to start and make sure those meals are primarily protein and fat, less carbohydrates, to lower insulin and put your body in a fat-burning state. Now you might be thinking, how many carbohydrates can I have? Well, if you really want to ramp up ketone production and burn fat, your total carbohydrates should be under 50 total grams per day, coming from non-starchy carbohydrates like green leafy vegetables and even low glycemic fruit like berries. Let's move on to rule number 3 here. Become metabolically flexible. I call it metabolically free. This means having a healthy metabolism that could burn sugar and carbohydrates when it needs to and burn fat and produce ketones as well and go back and forth. Unfortunately, studies show that 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. That's a 2022 study. They're stuck burning sugar and glucose. That's going to create disease, inflammation. It's going to create weight gain and weight loss resistance. So the first step is to do what I just told you to do in step 2, which is to lower carbs, eliminate the snacking, increase in proteins and fat. The second step is to then find a groove where most days you're burning fat, and maybe one day per week, you're intentionally increasing healthy carbs. And I outline this in my book, Metabolic Freedom. But the goal is to sustain metabolic flexibility. As I've interviewed scientist after scientist, doctor, researcher, all of them agree that metabolic flexibility is the key to longevity, to fat loss, to amazing energy levels. And the only way to sustain that is to first go from burning sugar to burning fat and then flex in and out. And Chapter 12 of my book, I have a 30-day roadmap that teaches you how to do that. And you could get the book over at metabolicfreedombook.com. There's a free course and exclusive interviews we're giving away with that order. So those are the golden rules for fat loss. Let's move on to the golden rules of metabolic health. Rule number 4, you got to heal the cell to get well. All disease begins in the cell membrane. For so many years, scientists believe that the intelligence of the human body was in the DNA nucleus. And then a gentleman named Dr. Bruce Lipton, a world-renowned cell biologist, came on the scene and he challenged that premise. And he did some amazing studies where he would remove the DNA nucleus from cells and observe what would happen next. And to his surprise, he found that the cells went on to function and thrive just fine for months, even without the DNA nucleus. Then he decided, I'm going to remove the cell membrane and see what happens. And poof, instant death every time he removed the cell membrane. You see, it is the cell membrane, which is this fatty bilayer around every single cell that controls the DNA. It is the intelligence. Life begins and life ends in that cell membrane. Think of your cell membrane as the bodyguard around your cells. It'll tell your DNA to turn on genes, turn off genes, and we want to support it with healthy amounts of inflammation. But Ben, I thought inflammation was bad. Well, you don't want zero inflammation. You want low inflammation, especially around the cell membranes. You see, when you have too much inflammation around the cell membranes, hormones cannot get into the cell, nutrients cannot get into the cell, oxygen cannot get into the cell, and then your body will present a symptom to you. But the symptom is not the problem. The symptom is a result of the problem. So you want to give your cell membranes the building blocks to lower inflammation, resensitize those receptor sites so you produce energy, you burn fat, and live a long, healthy life. So I've thought about this long and hard because there are a lot of different viewpoints here on the best ways to lower cell inflammation. I've had some scientists talk about sugar, some talk about seed oils, some talk about stress, environmental toxins, and I've wrapped my mind around this. And keep in mind, this is based off of 1,000 episodes here on the podcast, 900 different people I've interviewed, my 17 plus years of research, and I'll kind of give it to you in what I think is the most important things to remove to lower cell inflammation. I would say seed oils would be right at the top. Seed oils are called vegetable oils, polyunsaturated fatty acids, omega-6 fats, linoleic acid. And the reason why I say seed oils should be one of the first things you remove to lower cell inflammation is because they linger in your body for a very long time. The half-life of these bad fats is 2 years, meaning if you stopped eating them today, and I'll give you an entire list in a minute, 2 years later, half of them will remain in your body fat, creating inflammation. They go right into the cell membrane, and it happens within hours. In Metabolic Freedom, my book, I talk about this process called lipid membrane reorganization, meaning when you consume a bad fat, within hours, it gets embedded into the cell membrane, and then it's there for years. There's a study by Dr. Martin Grutfeld that I also put in the book that shows a French fry cooked in vegetable oil produces the same amount of what's called aldehydes, which are cancer-causing, as a tobacco cigarette smoked. Meaning, if you ate one French fry cooked in vegetable oil, it's essentially one tobacco cigarette smoked. Yikes. So the first step is to remove the following 9 fats. 8 of them are seed oils, and 1 of them is a surprising bad fat. So here's the list. Write it down. Canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, rice bran oil, and grapeseed oil. I've had Dr. Kate Shanahan, medical doctor, on this podcast, and she calls them the hateful 8. Then there's another fat that, okay, I have to say, probably there's a 50-50 split here in the people I've interviewed on the podcast where half of them say it's healthy, half of them say it doesn't really do much, and then that same half says it also could be bad for you. And it's fish oil. I actually believe fish oil does more harm than good. It is a very unstable fat that I do not recommend anybody take, even if it's from a great brand. I do not take fish oil. This might be a huge surprise for you. I get my fish oil from consuming the fish, and that's what I recommend you do the same thing. Now, what do you swap those fats with to rebuild those cell membranes, to lower inflammation and feel incredible? That's going to be saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. So that will be coconut oil, butter, ghee, beef tallow, duck fat. Those are amazing cooking fats. Then we have avocado oil and olive oil. These are monounsaturated fats, also great for salad dressings and dips. So that's a good start. You start replacing the bad fats with the healthy fats, you lower cell inflammation, and you're in the right direction. Let's move on to rule number 5 here. Fast like your life depends on it, because it does. Intermittent fasting and fasting strategies are one of the best ways to harness the innate intelligence. Interviewing all these amazing people, so many of them, the majority of them recommend fasting as the first line of defense for metabolic disease, for anti-aging, for fat loss, for gut health, for cell detoxification. It's nature's reset button. Every single cell in your body is hardwired for fasting and feasting and back and forth. When you eat food, it takes so much energy to digest food. I wish you would understand this. It just takes an extraordinary amount of energy, bandwidth, and blood flow to digest food. When you don't eat, like once you're 14 hours without food, there's a process that gets turned on called energy diversion. This is very cool, where you divert energy away from what would have been used for digestion, and now it's being used to heal the body, to send blood flow to the brain so you're focused, to pull fat from the liver, to heal different organs, to heal the body and burn fat. And as you continue advancing through your fasting window, 16 hours in, 17 hours in, you're lowering insulin, so you're burning fat, you're producing or you're ramping up a process called autophagy, which is cellular cleanup. Once you go 24 hours into a fast, there's a huge surge in human growth hormone. As a matter of fact, the studies show men get a 2,000% surge in this fat-burning anti-aging hormone called human growth hormone, 24 hours without food. And ladies, you get a 1,300% surge in human growth hormone. There's intestinal stem cells that are getting reboot during 24 hours without food, meaning if you struggle with acid reflux, GERD, bloating, it fixes that within 24 hours. 30 hours in, there's a surge in something called brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's like brain fertilizer where you're focused and alert. 36 hours in, you're crushing fat cells, producing ketones. 48 hours in, you're resetting your dopamine receptor sites. 72 hours in, you're creating a stem cell surge, all through fasting. So whether it is a 14-hour fast, 24-hour, 36-hour, find your groove of fasting and fast like your life depends on it, because it does. Chapter 8 of Metabolic Freedom goes deep into fasting, by the way. All right, rule number 6, eliminate obesogens. Chapter 5 of Metabolic Freedom goes deep into environmental toxins. Environmental toxins are the top driving force that lead to obesity, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, high blood pressure, even autoimmune conditions, because these toxins are everywhere. And one classification of these toxins are called obesogens. I've brought on so many researchers and scientists that talk about toxicity, that talk about how they create fat human beings. And here's how it works. I'll break it all down for you in the next few minutes. When these toxins enter the body, it triggers a pathway in your body called PPAR gamma. This is what I want you to understand about the human body and your metabolism. The number one priority for this human body is survival. It wants to survive. It'll do everything possible in the short term to survive. So when these toxins enter the body, PPAR gamma is turned on. This simply shuttles those toxins out of the bloodstream so they're not freely circulating, entering vital organs and killing you. And it shuttles them where? Into your fat cells. They're called lipophilic toxins, fat-loving toxins. Because the solution to this pollution is dilution. It'll dilute those toxins by sending them to your fat cells, and they get stuck there. Oh, there's no room in your fat cells? Your innate intelligence will increase the size of your fat cells. Oh, you ran out of room there? It'll literally create new fat cells. They're called obesogens for a reason. So where do we find these toxins? Let's start with some easy things you can do right away. Get rid of the plastic water bottles. Get rid of the plastic Tupperware. Get rid of the plastic cutting boards. We live in this microplastic generation where they're finding microplastics in men's testicles, in the brains of human beings, the arteries. We're turning into a plastic generation. So instead of plastic water bottles, switch over to glass water bottles. Instead of plastic Tupperware, switch over to glass. Instead of plastic cutting boards, switch over to wooden cutting boards. That goes a long way. And one more tip here. Say no to cash register receipts, which are loaded with a BPA toxin, and it actually has 1,000 times more toxins in terms of BPA than canned food. So do not touch your cash register receipts. Keep the detox pathways open. When I interview these detoxification specialists like Dr. Pompa, who's a mentor of mine. He's endorsed the book. He's been on the podcast, I think 6 or 7 times now. He was actually the first guest on the Metabolic Freedom Podcast in July of 2019. Because that's how much he means to me. He talks about keeping your detox pathways open. The lymphatic system, that's a very important detoxification system. And you could keep that moving along, this gutter system, this drainage system, by moving your body, sweating, doing sauna, supporting your liver with bitter-rich foods, and doing coffee enemas, eating eggs, taking choline to support the liver, which is another detoxification organ, and then going upstream, of course, with really toxic heavy metals, and that's for a different conversation. All right, rule number 7. Sleep is the ultimate metabolic therapy. Guest after guest have come on my show, and they've given all the sexy stuff. Do this biohack, do a cold plunge, infrared sauna, PEMF therapy, red light therapy, practice this fasting schedule, take this supplement. But they all agree that if you're skipping on sleep, none of that will work to the extent that you want it to work. Sleep is the Swiss Army knife for metabolic health. I have a whole chapter about it in my book, Metabolic Freedom, because it's that important. And here's what I have discovered. It's not necessarily about the total amount of sleep, meaning it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. Getting enough deep sleep, REM sleep. I believe 90 minutes of each deep and REM sleep is the right amount to hit, at least for me. I feel great when I hit that. And here are some tips that I could give to you based off of the sleep experts I've brought on my podcast over the last few years. Dark, cold bedroom. Dark meaning as dark as possible, either blackout curtains or a sleep mask. Cold bedroom meaning 65 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit seems to be the sweet spot. And then making sure you're not eating at least 3 hours before bed so you could get into this deep fat burning restorative sleep zone. Getting morning sunshine, and if you could get the sunset sunshine, that'll be great. And then taking things like magnesium and melatonin before bed, it will help you get quality sleep. Now let's move on to part 3 here, which is going to shift into the longevity aspect. I have 3 more rules for you. Rule number 8, hormesis is the key to anti-aging. What the heck is hormesis? For those watching on YouTube, I'll put a graph here that will illustrate how hormesis works in relation to exercise. But keep in mind, exercise could be replaced with any stressor. I'll give you a definition first before I show you this illustration. Hormesis essentially means you apply a stress to the human body adapts to the stress, and you're healthier and stronger. But if that stress is too much and you don't adapt to it, you're now worse off. So this graph shows you with exercise, if you find the right amount of exercise, the right intensity, and you recover, you lower inflammation, you burn fat, you extend your lifespan. But if you do too little exercise or too much exercise, you lose those benefits. Think of hormesis as a new lens that you look at when it comes to getting healthy and burning fat. Fasting is a stress. Sauna is a stress. Cold plunge is a stress. Red light therapy is a stress. Doesn't mean it's bad for you. These stressors are important. So what you want to do is when you apply a stressor like a cold plunge or a sauna, you should feel better the rest of the day. You should get better sleep. You could track something called heart rate variability, which I track HRV with my Oura ring. And essentially it's your heart rate variability. It's looking at your nervous system, and you want to get your average and work on increasing your heart rate variability. But that's the topic. I've done a lot of episodes on this, but essentially when you apply a stress, it doesn't mean it's bad as long as you adapt to the stress. It's important to actually strategically apply stressors and increase your adaptability to the stress. And I'll just throw in one more thing here. Chapter 11 of Metabolic Freedom gets into the melatonin as a way to increase that, what's called hormetic zone. So chapter 11 will give you a lot more information there. Okay, rule number 9, stack your biohacks. A fasted workout. A great fasted routine is to go work out in a fasted state because you burn more fat. Add sauna after the workout. Great idea. You stack that biohack. Walk after a meal. I know that's a simple little thing, but to me, it's a biohack. It gets you a faster result. Add red light during a workout. Add butter to your coffee. Like, these are cool things you can do. Add creatine into the mix. Add methylene blue with red light therapy. There's some really cool things you can mix and match. And I have so much content here on the Metabolic Freedom Podcast where you start to find these biohacks and you want to stack them slowly. Don't do it all at once, but you stack them slowly, and then your mitochondria will thank you for it. Rule number 10 here. This is the most important thing. I left it for the last part here. Rewire your mind. Understand that your thoughts will influence disease or health. Your beliefs become your biology. You are not a victim of your genetics. You are the author of your future. The average person has 60,000 thoughts every single day, and it's been proven those thoughts communicate with your DNA and signal to your DNA to produce a certain job. And if it's an angry thought, hateful thought, bitter thought, resentful thought, the signal sent to your DNA right away signals inflammatory proteins, which damages your telomeres, which essentially damages your DNA and shortens your lifespan with a single thought. But if that thought is loving, abundant, grateful, same signal sent, where it protects your DNA and you live a long, healthy life. So if you have 60,000 thoughts a day, which you do, you have 60,000 opportunities to put your body in an anti-inflammatory healing state. That is the greatest tip I could ever share with you here on my podcast. But it's not just about hearing it, it's about applying it. You are the most influential person you'll speak to today. And if you're not taking vitamin G, you gotta add it into the mix. Vitamin G, this is a bonus tip for you here. Vitamin G will take everything I just shared with you and it'll upgrade it to the next level. If you're looking to lower inflammation, buffer stress, turn the brain on, burn fat, heal serious conditions, vitamin G is where it's at. UC Davis has studies showing those who take vitamin G have healthier blood pressure levels, healthier blood sugar levels. Dr. Joe Dispenza has done studies on his participants going through his workshop, taking vitamin G, and he has shown that they have healthier levels of stress when they take vitamin G and their immune system becomes activated. One of the most influential studies ever done, most comprehensive studies ever done on vitamin G was from Harvard, published in JAMA, and I put this in Metabolic Freedom. 49,275 nurses in the study, and it showed something really remarkable. It showed that the nurses who took vitamin G every day had a 9% reduction in dying from all-cause mortality and a 15% reduction in dying from cardiovascular disease versus the nurses who didn't take vitamin G. One more study that I published from PubMed in the book showed that caregivers, keep in mind, caregivers have a very stressful job. It measured their mitochondria. Mitochondria are really important energy factories within your cells that produce energy, help you burn fat. It's one of the most important things to upgrade to live a long, healthy life. And they measured the mitochondria of these caregivers through something called the MHI, the Mitochondrial Health Index. And it showed that the caregivers that took vitamin G at night had healthier mitochondria the following morning versus the caregivers, who didn't. You're thinking, does Vitamin G sponsor the podcast? Do you have an affiliate link? I'm sure there are already comments on YouTube asking me where to purchase Vitamin G. You might already be on Amazon looking for Vitamin G, but here's the thing. Vitamin G is not something you could buy. Vitamin G is the feeling of gratitude. Everything I just shared with you when it comes to those studies is on gratitude. Not the practice of gratitude, the feeling of gratitude. Get your Vitamin G every day. Look, I have to say this. This is episode 1000. On the Metabolic Freedom Podcast. Cheers to 1,000 more. I am very grateful. I have vitamin G for you, whether this is your first time listening or watching the podcast or your 100th time watching or listening. Thank you. We'll continue to publish incredible information, solo content, interviews. We'll bring you the best of the best. If you're listening on the podcast, leave it a rating and review. Share this episode with a friend and stay tuned because we have a lot more information coming your way. Go pre-order or go order Metabolic Freedom over at metabolicfreedombook.com and get a free course on the metabolism with exclusive interviews. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And by the way, if you love this lesson, go check out a previous lesson on why your belly fat won't disappear, a 14-day protocol to melt stubborn fat. Check out this clip. I'll see you in that video. I'll be sharing with you a simple 7-step protocol that you will follow, and in 14 days, you will melt stubborn fat. It works whether you are brand new to trying to lose weight, you've hit a plateau, you've tried all these different diets and calories in versus calories out approach. All of these 7 steps are linked to each other. You have to